Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. In today's video, we're going to be looking at trench warfare and a little bit about land combat in the game Global War 1914. Most of the combat is similar to the 36 game, where the terrain features will affect the units basically the same way. But there is some key differences in this game, and particularly in the trench warfare aspect of the game. So what is a trench in the Global War 1914 game? You're looking at it right here. 6 regular infantry, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's just regular infantry. That does not include your naval infantry, or your trench fighters even, or your militia, or your colonial infantry, or your elite units, or your mountain infantry. These do not count towards your trench. So you need 6 regular infantry to count as a trench. All these other ones are just other units that you're using. They don't count any more than your artillery or anything else like that does. So let's just get them out of the way for now. Now, in the game, normally you have 3 rounds of combat, unless it's the winter time, but we'll get into that later. Normally you get 3 rounds of combat, but if after the first round the defender still has 6 regular infantry in the zone, then combat is over. And that's the biggest deal about trenches, is that your combat will only last 1 round. Now, if you can get them down to 5 or less infantry by the end of the first round, then you can continue combat. And of course, you probably have even less than that going into the 3rd round of combat, and then you can continue combat there. And hopefully you can get them out after the 3rd round. But in this game, once things start getting built up, like mid-game to late game, the trench lines are going to be pretty big. You're going to find out the first time you play this game that the infantry, the regular infantry sculpt in this game, and the regular artillery, those will be the 2 most important units in the game. And it's because of this trench warfare aspect, especially in Europe. Once you get out to the other parts of the map, then you're not going to see the same buildup of units, and so you're not going to see nearly as many trenches outside of Europe. And that's pretty accurate, right? I mean, outside of Europe, they didn't use trenches much. You know, they did use them, of course, but not to the extent that they used them, particularly in northern France. Anyway, so the other thing about the trench line, aside from the number of rounds of combat, is that if you have a trench, then the regular infantry, and only the regular infantry, will defend at +2. So normally an infantry defends at 4. These infantry are now going to defend at 6. And in the 2nd round, if you have at least 6 infantry, they're going to defend at 6 as well. And of course, if you had 12 of them, then you'd have 12 of them defending at 6, right? So that's pretty powerful, especially when you consider that 3 of the nations, and the ones in particular that are fighting in the battle on the Western Front, that would be Germany, France, and Britain, they have to make mandatory offensives. So they have to attack. Doesn't matter how strong that the defender is, they're going to have to attack once per year, and a year lasts for 3 turns, right? So anyway, that's the skinny on what a trench line is. Why don't we take this to the battle board and see how the fighting takes place. Now that we're on the battlefield, let's just take a look at a couple of the ways that the number required to make a trench line could be changed a little bit. That's something that you're going to want to use when you're attacking a trench line, and when you're defending it. You're going to need to know these things. Okay, so first of all, let's just say that's the Germans that are attacking Lorraine here. Now, you can see that the French have 6 infantry, and that the British have 3 infantry and 1 trench fighter. The trench fighter we disregard, as well as the French artillery, because they are not involved in the trench line. or in creating the trench line. Same with the French naval infantry. So we only count the infantry here. Now, the French have 6 infantry, so that means that they have a trench line. But the British only have 3 regular infantry, so they do not have a trench line. That means when the Germans attack, these French units here, these regular infantry, are going to get +2 in their defense. So they're going to roll at 6s. These British infantry are only going to roll at 4s. And then when you're taking your casualties off, you're going to want to be strategic about that. Like let's say the Germans managed to get 6 casualties. Like if it was me, I'd probably take off the 4 British, right? And then the naval infantry. That way the attack ends, because that you still have a trench line on the second round of combat. So that means that this battle is over. Now these guys probably would have suffered a number of casualties as well. But the point is that you're going to want to keep that to have at least 6 there. And also that each nation in that territory needs to build its own trench line. Now, another thing that you can do to alter the number of units in there that you're attacking with, let's give the British some more. Let's just give them a big stack of infantry. There we go. And let's give them a bunch of artillery too. Let's say the British are going to attack the Germans here. Now, other than the infantry and the artillery, they are also taking with them 3 tanks. There we go. So if you have tanks, then the number of tanks that you have adds to the number of infantry, regular infantry, that they must have in order to have a trench line. So you look here, we have 3 tanks and they've got 9 infantry. So this is still a trench line. However, if they only had 8 infantry, then that would not be a trench line, because they need 6 plus 1 for each of the tanks that are coming in. So there's 6, 7, 8, 9. So that is not a trench line. So already the British know that they can go in and attack, and as long as they're not losing too many, then they can continue that attack up to 3 turns, right? So that is a couple of the ways that you can alter the number on a trench line, and there are a couple more ways, but we'll get to that later on in the video. Okay, so let's talk about combat now that we've established what a trench line is. So in this scenario here, the French are going to attack the Germans. First thing we do is to see if there's a trench line. So we've got 7 regular infantry, and we've got 1 French tank. So that is just barely a trench line that the Germans have. And so the French are going to have to eliminate one of these infantry units in order to carry on with a second round of attacks. So how does combat work? Now, it works much the same, in the same order as the 36 game. So you'll do your first strike first. Now that's first strike for these units that are on the board. That would be the, sorry, not the tank. That would be the artillery and the trench fighter and the German artillery. So you would roll those units and you would remove the casualties. Now with the artillery, and also, let me just grab a heavy artillery piece as well here. Now aside from artillery being first strike, you could also have heavy artillery as first strike, and armored train could also be in there as first strike. Now these things have all moved into this zone in order to attack, just like in the 36 game. I just leaving them here so that we can see better, okay? But assume that all these units are in here. Now the French have also developed strategic bomber technology. So the strategic bomber is also going to make a carpet bombing run, but that only lasts for the first round of combat, right? Now, you're going to fire off the artillery and also the heavy artillery, and this is our artillery class as well. You can't forget about that. The armor train is artillery class. Now, there's also something called observation in this game. So that would be your fighters and your balloons and also your zeppelins. The Germans got a zeppelin over here. You can only do one thing per round with each of them. So if you're also going to dogfight, then you would just do the dogfighting with the fighters. And then the balloons and the zeppelin would be doing the observation. But let's just assume that there's no dogfighting. They don't have that ability yet, which probably means that they wouldn't have a strategic bomber just yet. So you're just doing with observation. So you've got one fighter, one balloon. That's it for observation. So two of the artillery or the other types of artillery will be boosted by one. Now normally our regular artillery in this game shoots at 4, so you could shoot 2 of these artillery at 5 if you wanted, or you could boost the armored train or the heavy artillery. And the same on defense. These guys have got 3 over here, so they can boost 3 of their artillery. So 3 of them would go at 4, and 3 of them would go at 5, right? They would roll at 5. So you do all that rolling, and you remove the casualties, and then everybody else goes. So your fighters were not dogfighting yet. This is early in the game, and they don't have the ability to dogfight. So they're not used in the fighting now. They will be, if there is a second round, they will be observing again, but they're not used as dogfighters because they don't have that ability yet. They didn't have guns on the planes. Anyway, so whatever is left, let's just take off a couple of casualties here. Well, I'll just leave them on, assuming that they've lost some casualties. Now the infantry or the attacking infantry defends at what they, or attacks at what they normally attack at. Or sorry, artillery compare with infantry class units plus cavalry plus camels. Now you're not going to have any camels in Europe, but if you had some artillery down in the Middle East or down in Africa, then certainly you could pair them with your camels. And so you would pair your artillery with your infantry class units or whatever you wanted that you have that can pair, and they would roll, and then the defenders would roll. And because they started, like even if you had taken off, let's say 3 of these things, and you say, okay, there's no longer a trench line, but you started this round with a trench line, so these 4 guys will still roll at +2 because it's when the round started. Let's get rid of this Zeppelin here. He doesn't want to stand up. We've already talked about him anyway. So anyway, then these guys would still roll at 6 instead of 4 because the round started as a trench line. So then you would remove your casualties afterwards, after all the other units have fought, and then you look at it again. Like let's take off some casualties here. Let's put some of these guys back on. And you always got to be careful, even when you're on the offense, right? You want to absolutely make sure that you've still got enough infantry, because the Germans are going to come back at you again, right? So you still want to make sure that you have enough infantry to build a trench line for when they attack, right? Now you look at it here, and the Germans do not have a trench line anymore. So the French can elect, if they'd like to, and I would in this case, can continue to go for a second round of attack, and then a third round of attack if they still wanted to do that. Okay, so that's how regular combat works on a trench line. Okay, so let's see how carpet bombing works here. So the French are going to carpet bomb the Germans. Now, the only thing that can possibly stop the carpet bombing from happening is a fighter, and only if that fighter has the ability to fight, right? Like if we were only in 1915, then this fighter here probably, and I say probably, has only has the ability to observe. Now, he might have more ability than that because you can choose to develop the technology, advanced fighter technology, which will put you one step ahead. So like in 1916, then you would have 1917 fighters. Or even if you were in 1915, you can only go one step ahead. So August 1915, you could have 1916 fighters. In 1916, if everybody else has 16 fighters, you can have 1917 fighters, right? But anyway, probably this guy just has the ability to observe. In other words, this guy gets his free carpet bombing. He'll go in and he'll roll his dice and see if he can kill any of the ground units. And then that's it. Carpet bombing only lasts around. There is no anti-aircraft in this gun except for the inherent anti-aircraft guns that are connected to facilities like factories or naval bases of whatever kind. Those will have inherent anti-aircraft abilities. So they will fight on a strategic bombing run alone. They will not fight when you are carpet bombing. So that's it for carpet bombing. Another thing that we have in this game as far as land combat goes is attrition attacks. Now that's something in the 36 game that you only get with technology. But in this game, you're going to find right away that your artillery is your technology. So your artillery already has the ability to do attrition. The tough part is remembering, because you take one of the things you want to do, even if you have to write it on your opponent's forehead, so when you look at him it says attrition on it. That means, oh yeah, dummy, don't forget to make your attrition attacks. Now an attrition attack takes place from one territory to an adjacent territory. So let's say in this turn it's the Germans are not going to do anything with they're not going to attack into here. They're just going to make an attrition attack with their artillery. So you would roll 2 dice with the Germans artillery there, and they would try to get a 1. And you think, well, that's not very good. A 1 isn't going to kill too many. And you'd be right about that. But you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And if you have a heavy artillery, then that's going to shoot at 2 or less. So you might have 20 artillery on the board that you're not attacking with or not moving this turn, and so you might as well blast them off. Now one thing you can't do, like you notice I just said moving, you can't move an artillery to a territory adjacent and then make an attrition attack. The artillery that you're making attrition attacks could not have done anything else this turn. So no combat movement, no non-combat movement. The only thing they can do is just sit there and blast away. And the interception value the observation isn't there to begin with. There is, you'll see with technology later, that can be enhanced a bit, but we'll get to that later. That's basically how attrition works. As far as scrambling fighters goes, there are no air bases in this game. There's 3 different kinds of scrambling in this game. You can scramble your fighters, you can scramble your ships, and we went over that with the in-port rules. You could see how they scrambled out into the sea zone. You could scramble seaplanes from a seaplane base, but fighters don't have any kind of air bases in this game. There is a type of air base, but it's only this one here. This is an airship base. But anyway, that doesn't help the fighters. But fighters do get to a scramble, defending fighters get to a scramble into an adjacent zone. So this guy could scramble from here into here and help defend that attack if he wants to. You know, he could come from here, he could come from here. He has to be adjacent, and then he can scramble into a zone that is being attacked. As far as target selection goes, the only things in this game that have target selection are armored cars and trench fighters and submarines. Submarines don't have anything to do, obviously, with this video. But those are the only 3 units in the game that have target selection in this game. So there's not much target selection, and you probably know what target selection is from the 36 game. That means that the attacker gets to choose what the defender is going to lose. And that's a pretty big deal because you want there to be less army or less infantry in that territory so that you can continue your attack beyond one turn or beyond one round. And so that makes it a big deal, although it's pretty faint hope for target selection. With these guys here, it's a target selection of 1 or 2, and with the armored cars, I'm pretty sure it's only 1. So it's pretty faint hope. And how you get armored cars, like you can't just buy them from the start of the game. You have to have tank technology at stage 3, then you're allowed to start buying armored cars. And then once you hit stage 4 with tank technology, then you can also buy tanks. All right, it's time for everyone's favorite part of the video, it seems. It's the one you get the most comments on. So you can see what I have there is an elite marker and 2 Russian Cossacks. Why am I showing those? Well, because it is contest time. And why is it contest time? Well, I gotta tell you how grateful I am, because I have now more than 3,500 subscribers. I just passed 3,500, I think, over the weekend. I don't know. I just kind of noticed it this morning when I was getting ready for making this video. But anyway, so I'm really grateful for that. I was looking at some of the other numbers too. There's over 928,000 views on my videos. I've been at it for over 5 years now, almost 6 years, I think. Let me see. 16. It was in the fall of 2016. 1960. I've been at this for 100 and anyway. It seems like a long time. I can't remember the time when I didn't used to make videos. Put it that way. Anyway, and the other thing that surprised me was that this video here is my 400th video. So that's pretty amazing. So what are you going to get for a contest winner? Well, thanks to my friend Doug at historicalboardgaming.com, who produces this game and all the other Global War games and all of your other favorite products to play with Axis and Allies and Global War and many, many other games, including decals and roundels, and you could just go on forever. Paint now, have you looked at the paint? They got some great paint sets with some quality paints. And tons of 3D printed units, like that's what these things are, is 3D printed units. So the prize will be 4 of all of the elite units here that we play in this game. Now, the only reason I'm showing the Cossacks is because that's the only 3D printed unit that I have thus far for this game. I've seen the other, there's 3 more that are probably going to be out this week. There's going to be the German Jaeger and the Austro-Hungarian. We've changed him, actually. We were going to have a Jaeger for him, but it never really sat well with us. You know, we kind of wanted a different one. So we did a little bit more digging, and we're going to go with a Grenadier for the Austro-Hungarians. That hopefully will be out by the end of this week. And the Ottoman Guards, that'll be out this week. And pretty soon after that, like you've seen that there are Gurkhas on the site, 3D printed Gurkhas. Those are World War II Gurkhas. There's going to be some World War I Gurkhas coming out, as well as some US Marines, some Italian Bersaglieri. Anyway, all the nations that are supposed to have elite units, they're going to be out, and you're going to get 4 of each of them. And also we're going to give you 3 sets of these markers, so that's 15 elite markers. So thanks to Doug for doing all that and for supporting me for the last number of years as I make videos. He's really been a help as far as providing me with lots of stuff to make videos with, lots of content, and I can't thank him enough, and I can't thank you enough for bringing me this far. You know, like this is what makes it fun for me. I'd have enough fun as it is playing this game and playing other games like this, but it just makes it a lot more fun that I get to share it with all of you, because as you probably know if you've been watching my channel for a long time, There's only one other guy in town that I know that plays these games, and that's my friend Panzer King, who is not Panzer King anymore, but he was for many years, and now he's Sky Marshal. But that makes it really important that I'm able to bring thousands of people in over the years into my war room here to play games with me. And like I said, that's just made it twice as much fun. So how are you going to win those? Well, as usual, you'll comment in the comment section of this video. And what I want you to do, because I've put out 400 videos after this one comes out, which one of them is your favorite? What's your favorite General Hand Grenade video? So just put it in the comment section and you will be entered to win. Let me see, what is there? 8 countries times 4, so 32 units, and you know that'll go a long ways towards building your Global War 14 set, right? You'll probably need a couple more Cossacks, and then as far as the more chips go, like the 15 chips will be enough if you don't glue them on there, right? But if you do like to glue them on like I do, then there is going to be a marker set coming out. We just talked about this last week, all the different products that we're going to put out with this game, and one of them was a marker set, you know, with all the naval infantry and, you know, colonial troops and things like that. Those types of markers, import markers and poison gas markers, all of those things that you're going to need that are unique to this game. Anyway, included in that would be 15 elite markers. So if you win these 15 and you buy that set that you're going to need, and that's another 15, then that's just about as many as you need, because you're not going to put them underneath the cavalry, right? Like I wouldn't anyway. There's no need to. I think these bases are going to be round anyway. I got them before we changed the cavalry bases, but you don't really need to put them on that chip. You could just color the base a different color if you'd like, or you could put them on the chips. It's up to you. Anyway, that's what we're doing. So thanks again, and good luck to you if you enter this contest. Okay, let's talk about some of the other things that can affect fighting in trench lines, because like I was saying earlier, I mean, you can get some pretty big trench lines. Like once you start getting 12, 15, maybe even up to 20 regular infantry on a trench line, it gets really hard to get through there, right? You're going to have to keep attacking whether you like it or not, just to keep the trench lines from getting that big. And they will suffer attrition as well, because they have to attack you. And of course, I'm talking about here on the Western Front, right? The French are going to need some help in there. But how do you break that trench line? We already talked about like tanks. If you use tanks, then that lowers the number by 1 for each tank that you use, once you've developed that technology, if you choose to develop that technology. And you know what we found when we were playtesting? People weren't developing that technology because it only worked, they're only really useful on a trench line, and probably on the Eastern Front as well in Russia, because there's no mountain terrain over there. Like tanks don't move in mountains, right? You can move them on the rails, but that doesn't help you, right? Anyway, so for the 3 nations, the Germans, the French, and the British, they're going to automatically get tank technology, but they're going to have to pay for it, and that's mandatory. They have to do it, just because we wanted to make sure that you were going to get tanks in the game. The only other ones that I would even bother, you'll play the game though, you'll figure it out. Maybe you'll figure out a better way to play it than we did, right? But I'm just going to give you some ideas here, and I'm not going to tell you everything that I know about this. I'm just going to tell you what the rules are, because I want you to try to figure out what is the best way to break down trenches. I tell you, we banged our head against the wall for years, and I think I figured it out, but you know what? You might figure out a better way to get through there. So a few of the things that that you can use. First of all, there's the technology that is going to affect how things happen, not only in trench fighting, but in land combat. I'm just going to give you the ones for land combat. We're not going to go over the other ones. So one is counter battery fire. And so what that is the artillery returns fire on attrition attacks. So, you know, like if you're the Germans, remember how I said don't forget to shoot off every cannon that didn't move? In this case here, where you've only got one artillery and the French have 6 artillery, if the French have counter battery fire, then you do not want to be doing an attrition attack against them, because you've got one artillery, you've got one heavy artillery. The French here, they've got heavy artillery and they've got an armored train in there, that counts as well, and they've got 6 artillery. So they've got you outgunned there. So counter battery fire, that's one thing that could be helpful to you to knock down some of the units that are there, and also help in that they're going to be scared to attack you with attrition attacks, right? The other thing is here, poison gas. Now, poison gas, like fighters, is on a rolling scale. So everybody starts with tear gas at the start of the game. It has no impact. I don't even know why we have it on there. But if you manage to get one successful roll in developing poison gas, then the marker itself, to buy one of these markers, it costs 2 IPP, and you have to spend it, right? Like you'll have to, okay, I'm going to make an attack. I better put some more artillery in there. We'll be attacking like that. So Germans are going to make an attack. They've got gas. They take gas in there with them, right? And it gives +1 to all artillery attacks in the territory for 1 round. So all of the artillery is going to get boosted by 1 for that 1 round. Also, the defender first strike ability in the first round, first time it's used in a game. So you can't just keep doing it turn after turn after turn where they lose their first strike ability. Only the first time you use this marker for chlorine gas do they lose their first strike ability, and your artillery is +1. And that's all of your artillery, right? Like that's your trains, your heavy artillery, your regular artillery. So then if you keep going and you get phosgene gas, then again, marker costs 2 IPPs, and that means you get +1 bonus to all artillery attacks in the territory for 1 round, and +1 bonus to attrition. Now that could add up, right? If you have a bunch of artillery, because, you know, like it's still only going to attack at 2, right? And it eliminates the defender first strike ability the first time that that's used in a game. And then if you develop it again, so you're on the 4th stage of poison gas, and again, marker costs $2, +1 to artillery attacks for 2 rounds, not just for 1 round, but for 2 rounds, and +1 bonus to attrition, and it eliminates that defender first strike ability first time it is used in a game. So as you can see, as you go with the poison gas, it gets better and better, right? Or worse and worse if you're the defender. I wouldn't want to use it. What's next? So hurricane bombardment. Now that one's pretty useful actually. So if you've got 6 or more artillery in a territory, then you can extend your combat to 2 rounds. So even though the guy has formed a trench line and he still has a trench line after 1 round, like he's still got 6 infantry. Let's take this tank off, that'll make it confusing. So even though he still has 6 infantry, you can keep going because you've got 6, 7, 8 artillery units. So if you had hurricane bombardment technology, you can go for a 2nd round of combat. So that's pretty useful. And it'll break down a trench line a lot faster, right? Another thing that you can get, defense in depth. Now this is one that we were developing all the time because trenches are so important in this game, and also your ability to choose the units that you want to lose instead of just losing all your artillery and saving all your infantry, right? So what that means is that you only need 4 infantry to create a trench line. So the Germans here would only need 4 infantry. There, that's a trench line. Of course, then if you're using the tank, then it needs to be 5, and using another tank needs to be 6. So you would just start at 4 instead of starting at 6, and then that doesn't change anything else. Like these 4 guys will still roll at +2, right? Only the infantry class units. Now, if you had 6 of them in there, it doesn't matter. You have a trench line, and you've got a couple guys to spare, but all of them will roll at 6 instead of 4. And we've already talked about tanks, and we've talked about armored cars. You get those on level 3 of tanks, and they have target selection. So fighter evolution. Now there's another one that is going to affect land combat. So when you start the game, the 1914 fighters will only have an observation, and it will only move 2. So that's all they can do. So basically you have to be adjacent to a territory in order to attack it, because you have to safely be able to make it home, right? So 1 and then 2, you have to be able to get back. Unless you take that territory, then you can stay there. But you know, like, it's not one of those things where you're going to guess, right? Like, you got to make sure you got that landing spot available to you. But probably you're going to want to move out of there, because after you move into here, they probably got lots of guys in Paris, and you know, maybe you don't have enough guys left, so you'll decide, yeah, you know what, I'm going to get out of here with my fighter, right? So that's the first one. And then the second one is a 1916 fighter. So what'll happen is at the beginning of 1916, before anything happens, everybody has fighters on the board, or everybody that does have fighters on the board have to decide whether or not they want to keep them, right? And if you want to keep them, then you're going to have to pony up some money for them. 2 IPP per fighter. So if you've got 3 fighters on the board, if you want to keep those 3 fighters, you got to pay 6 IPP to the bank, and then you get to keep those fighters. So, you know, like, you probably want to earlier in the game, but then when it's getting down late in the game, then you're thinking, geez, you know, do I need this money, or do I want my fighters, right? Like, it'll be a choice for you, that's for sure, right? And that's what we wanted. We wanted lots of choices in this game for you to make, right? So what happens with 1916 fighters is they've got the observation and they've got the dogfighting. So when you have dogfighting, then your fighters will fight the other fighters, kind of like in the 36 game. The first round of combat will be fighter on fighter. So if you get a hit with your fighter, the other guy loses their fighter. And then the second round, if you still got a fighter, if there is a second round, then you will be either using him for observation, or well, I guess that's the only thing that you could use a 1916 fighter for. Now, you can't use both on the same turn. Like, you can't go in and dogfight on the first round and observe with your artillery. You can only do one, right? So if there's another fighter there, you have to fight him. But if there is no other fighter there, then you can use him for observation. But you only get one, right? You can't do it both. In 1917 fighters, you've got, and on the 16, their attack and defense is at 2. In the 1917 fighter, their attack and defense is at 3. And they have dogfighting. Now they have interception, so they can stop a strategic bombing run, or not stop, I mean, they can take part in a strategic bombing run, whether it's escorting or it's intercepting the bombers, right? Or balloons. Sorry, not balloons, zeppelins or airships, I mean. And they can do ground strikes. So in a 1917 fighter, you can shoot units that are on the ground, any type of unit. It's up to the defender, though, to decide which unit they want to lose, right? And then the last one is a 1918 fighter. Now, this is actually a good fighter. And sorry, the movement of 16 fighter is 2. The movement of a 17 fighter is 3. So you get to move one more space. Now, a 1918 fighter also moves 3, but it's got an attack and a defense of 5. It's got observation, it's got ground dogfighting, it's got interception. And their interception is at 2 now, whereas the interception was at 1 for a 1917 fighter. They've got ground strike, and now they've got naval strike. So that's the difference there with the last one, is that it can also shoot against ships. So those are your fighters. let's see, the next thing is your strategic bombers. So we've got a strategic bomber here, and that's, of course, aside from being able to bomb facilities, this is about land combat, this video, so I put this on the list because he can do carpet bombing, and as I said earlier, the only thing that can stop him is a fighter that has an attack capability, which they probably will, right? As you see, as you're progressing along there, it's going to take you a while to develop bombers anyway, and so by then you're probably going to have a fighter that has guns on it. And then another thing that can affect how it's fought here is improved recruitment. So you see these icons here, there's 3 of them. That means that you can put 3 infantry class units here. That's it. This one here, 3. This one here, 3. Now this is just a playtest map, and the icon is going to be different, but it'll clearly show that your manpower is 3 in this territory. Now, what the improved recruitment does, one of the things that it does, it makes your manpower icon +1. So there you go. This will be 4. This will be 4. This will be 4. That's a pretty big deal because, as you can see, regular infantry are really important in this battle on the Western Front. And if you get improved recruitment, well, you can start building more infantry than the other side, right? So that's it for the technology. Now, another thing that you can use to break your trench lines is a trench fighter. So a trench fighter, now he's no good on defense. Like I think he's only a 1 or a 2 on defense. So, you know, they're only good for offense. You're way better off with a regular infantry on defense, right? But what a trench fighter does, first of all, let's just show you that Germany, France, and Italy have the ability to purchase them in spring of 1916, and then all the other nations can purchase them beginning in the fall of, or winter of 1916. So what they're good for is they've got first strike of 1 or 2 against trench line land units. So only if you have a trench line, you're coming in to attack them, then you've got first strike ability against them. Okay, and the other thing that a trench fighter has, he's got first strike against the trench line and a target selection of 1 or 2 against land units. So you can't choose to take down a bomber or a Zeppelin, you know, or a fighter. But you could, like if it was me, you know, I'd either want to be taking down an infantry to bring them down below the mark that they need to build a trench, or if, you know, like they've still got 15 and there's no way you're going to get there anyway, you might as well just go for the heavy artillery or a tank. If they got tanks, you know, go for, those are really the only 2. I guess a train too. Yeah, a train would work. They're the only really expensive land units, right? Anyway, you'll decide, right? You'll take a look at what they got and you'll decide what to take off them. Another thing that can affect your combat is fortification. Now, fortifications are a little different in this game in that we don't put them on a line. Like in the 36 game, that would only defend against that line. We don't do that in this game. You put it in that territory, it defends all borders in that territory when you buy a fortification. But the thing is, we made it 4 turns to build it. It doesn't cost any more. I think it's still $8, but it takes 4 turns to build it. And that's just so that it would take you a long time to build fortifications. If you see somebody building a fortification, then you might want to attack that territory first. We don't want fortifications all over the board because, as you can see with the trench warfare, it's pretty hard to get through there anyway. So what that does now, first of all, you get the 2d12s at 5, just like the 36 game, +2 defense to infantry class and artillery class units in the first round. So these guys will all defend at 6. Your artillery will defend at 6, and of course their first strike. And these, what are those things? So yeah, these guys will defend at 5 on the first round instead of 3. Now that's not going to work for your fighters or any of your other air units. That's only going to work for your defending land units, the artillery class and the infantry class. And that's about it for fortifications. So they're pretty useful, especially if you got a lot of artillery. But if you've got a trench line, that's pretty good too. So you know, like I don't think you're going to see a million fortifications on the board. And like the 36 game, you can only put one in a territory, right? You can't put 6 of them in there and say, okay, my infantry is defending at 14 now. Doesn't work that way. Okay, the next thing is the seasons. Okay, so in the fall winter, there's 3 turns to a year, right? There's the spring season, the summer season, and then the fall winter season. Now in the fall winter season, all land attacks are 1 regardless. It doesn't matter if there's a trench line or not. And all naval combat is 2 rounds. Another thing is Marines can't use narrow crossings in the winter. And then also the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Seaway is closed. You can't move in there, and I don't think that'll ever be an issue. I've never seen that happen in 36 or 14 where people are moving around in the Great Lakes. The Americans are usually all over that. You might ask yourself, well, what about, you know, like when it's winter in the north and then the southern hemisphere is summer, right? That's just the reality of the world that we live in. We were aware of that, and we talked about this at great length. And we talked about, okay, we could cut it off here. And when it's winter here and it's summer there, you know, we could switch it. But then, you know, what about the Middle East? The Middle East, there's never winter, right? It's always summer. Like what about the equator all along there? There's never going to be snow or ice, right? And we just said, you know what? Let's just say fall, winter. For ease of gameplay, let's just say fall, winter. The rules are the same all over the map. And you might think, well, that's not very realistic. But the thing is, we did not want you to have a manual sitting beside you and having to look, okay, Persia. Now, what is Persia? Is it summer there? Is it winter there? Does it even matter? Like, we want to make the game fun. And in order to be fun, you don't want to stick your nose in a book for the entire game. Like, we understand you're going to need to have a rule set and your things. But I tell you, by now, playing version 3 of 36, I hardly ever need a rule book. Like, you can learn the rules and you can play the game and you can keep going like that, right? You just need to look up certain things that are not used very often. And this is one of those things where we didn't want you to have to look up. That you could just say, okay, fall, winter, that means that combat is limited this round, and that's all over the world. Anyway, and then the last thing that is going to affect your land combat is your terrain. And the terrain is basically the same as it is in the 36 game. In fact, the map is the same. So the terrain that you see on that game is the same terrain that you're going to see here. The deserts will all be the same place. The mountains will be the same. The differences in this game are that your cavalry can't cross a desert, and your camels can't be more than 1 space away from desert. You're not going to see any camels in North America. You're not going to see any of them in Europe. You know, like it's just not going to happen because they have to be close to the desert in order to exist on the board. That's about the only difference with the terrain in this game. Otherwise, all of those terrain features that you're used to in the 36 game exist in the 1914 game. I think that's about it. I mean, I could probably go on a little bit longer about this, but like I said, a lot of the stuff is the same. You know, things that you're used to doing. You're going to pick this up really quickly. If you played the 1936 game a lot, you're going to pick this up very quickly. The fun part will be the game within the game, especially on the trench lines. Like, what do I lose? You're trying to, you know, like especially after the first strike is finished. You know, like if you only knew what the rest of the units were going to use or do, then you could get yourself down to 6 infantry. But you don't want to get yourself down too far on the infantry because you don't know what his infantry is going to do, right? How many hits they're going to get. So it's all about choosing the right units. It's all about using the right units against that trench line. And it's a lot about timing as well, because you have to maintain those mandatory offensives. Once per year, France, Germany, and Britain have to make an offensive in Europe. And not just anywhere in Europe, like it doesn't count in Russia. They have to be in France or Germany or Italy. That's where the mandatory offensives have to take place. And so more than likely you will be going against a trench line in those mandatory offensives. So you have to time things. And you know, like when winter's coming, you know that the winter turn is coming up. You just plan for that. You say, okay, you know what? This is the turn that I'm going to restock, right? This is the turn that I'm going to not do much. Even when you're down in Africa, and there really shouldn't be a winter, you know that you've only got one turn. So unless you're going with overwhelming odds, there's no point in attacking, right? You'll attack next turn, unless, you know, you're getting down near the end of the game and you have to attack, right? But again, the mandatory offensive, you might want to time for the wintertime turn, right? Because you're probably only going to do one round anyway, unless for some reason you totally dice the guy and he doesn't hit you. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. I think that you're going to enjoy this game and enjoy the combat in this game. It's not as dynamic as the other game, that's for sure, but it's different. It's very, very different, especially this mechanic here with the trench lines. I think you'll find it interesting. You might miss your planes. Not gonna lie. I wish I had a bunch of planes in this game, but you don't. You've got trench lines instead. So that's it for this video. Take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.